Hello, I hope you find this story interesting. Your feedback and subscription are always welcome. The morning began as usual. Anne was sitting in her room in the nursing home, looking out the window. The sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains, and everything looked so peaceful. She was drinking tea when a nurse came in and handed her a letter. "There must be some mistake," Anne said when she saw the official envelope. She slowly opened it and pulled out several documents. Her eyes skimmed over the text until she saw the most important thing. Her house was sold. "Impossible!" she exclaimed, her voice breaking the silence. On the signature on the documents looked like hers, but she knew for sure it wasn't hers. Her heart was pounding and her mind was racing with questions. Anne immediately thought of Linda, her only daughter. She was the one who helped move Anne to the nursing home, explaining that it would be better for her health. They discussed that this was temporary, that her home would wait for her while she recuperated. "My Linda." "Oh, no, it can't be," she whispered, feeling her hands shaking. She hurriedly called for a nurse. "Please call my daughter. It's urgent." The nurse nodded politely, but returned a few minutes later. "Your daughter can't talk right now." Anne asked, she said she would call back later. Anne felt her legs give out. She had been waiting for the call all day. Her mind was a mess. How could this have happened? She had always trusted Linda. Could her daughter have done this? And in the evening, when the phone finally rang, Anne answered it immediately. "Glinda, what happened to my house?" Her voice was shaking. There was silence on the other end of the line. She heard Linda sigh heavily. Mom, I wanted to talk to you about it, but I did it for both of us," Linda began, but Anne interrupted her. "You sold my house without my knowledge. How could you?" "Mom, you know I'm in financial trouble. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I needed the money for me and my family," Linda said, trying to sound confident. Anne felt her heart clench with pain. She hung up the phone without saying another word. Sheshi sat in silence, feeling waves of anger and frustration wash over her. She had lost more than just her home. She had lost her trust in the one person she had always considered her support. Akuda the next morning, and decided that she would find out the truth. She would not let this betrayal go unanswered, and has always been a strong woman. She grew up in a small town where honesty and hard work were valued. Her husband, Henry, was her support until his death 10 years ago. Together they built their home, spacious, cozy, and filled with memories. Linda, their only daughter, was always Daddy's favorite. Henry adored her and often told Annie, "Our Linda will grow up to do great things." Anne supported these dreams even when Linda began to show stubbornness. She often went her own way, even if it caused tension in the family. After Henry's death, Anne and Linda became closer. They went through the loss together, supporting each other, and even decided to help Linda when she lost her job a few years ago. "Mom, I will find a way. Just give me some time," Linda used to say, but Anne saw her daughter struggling financially, and then decided to use some of her savings to help Linda pay off her debts. "Mom, you're the best." Linda hugged her, but Anne noticed something in her eyes. Was it gratitude or hidden anger? Linda always wanted to be independent, but she often made decisions that put her in difficult situations. For example, she married Tom, a man who, in Anne's words, liked to talk more than work. Tom often came to Anne with big ideas. "Mom, Anne, do you think we should invest in this business? It will bring in a lot of money." Anne always said no, knowing that his plans were more of a risk than a chance. The Anne and Linda's relationship began to change when Tom began to participate in their financial conversations. Linda became less open with her mother, and Anne noticed. "Mom, you're always criticizing Tom. Give him a chance." Linda would say when Anne tried to express her concerns. Anne realized that she couldn't control her daughter's life, but she was worried about how much Linda was pulling away. One day, when Anne fell ill and spent several days in the hospital, Linda decided that her mother would be better off in a nursing home. "Mom, it won't be forever, just so you can recover," she explained. Anne reluctantly agreed. Her house remained empty, but she was sure she would return. In the beginning, Linda often visited her mother and brought her grandchildren, but gradually these visits became less frequent. "Mom, I'm very busy, and Tom has found a new project, and we're working all the time," she would say. making excuses, and tried not to put pressure on her daughter, but she felt that their bond was weakening. The relationship between Anne and Linda had always been a complicated dance between love and misunderstanding. Anne loved her daughter more than anything, but she always felt that Linda was hiding something important. Anne sat on the edge of her bed in a small room in the nursing home. The window overlooked the garden, but the beauty of the landscape could not drown out the storm in her soul. As she looked through her memory for moments that could explain how Linda had decided to take this step. When did it all go wrong? Thought Anne, clutching a photo of Linda when she was just 10 years old. And she began to recall moments that at the time seemed trivial. "Mom, you don't need such a big house," Linda had said a few months ago. It sounded like concern then, but now it had a completely different meaning. She remembered Linda coming in with documents supposedly related to health insurance. "Mom, it's just a formality. You don't have to worry," her daughter would say, and sign without even reading them. Or the moment when Linda started actively asking about the value of the house and whether she had any more savings. "Mom, you've always been so frugal. What if something happened? What would you want to do with your money?" It's strange to her at the time, but she didn't think much of it, and decided that she could no longer sit idly by. She went to the administrator of the nursing home, Mrs. Harper. "Excuse me, but could you please help me?" "Akata," she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course, Anne. What is it? Do you have any records of who paid for my stay here and how?" "I have some suspicions," she said. Mrs. Harper brought over a folder of documents. They indicated that Linda was paying, but that recently payments had come from an unknown account. "That's strange," Anne said, feeling her heart sink. She decided to talk to the staff to find out more. She approached the nurse, who was always friendly. "Mary, do you remember the last time Linda came to see me?" "The last time she was here was a month ago," the nurse replied with a shrug. "And what did she say?" "She asked if you had complained about anything, but then she added that you might have forgotten how to sign some papers," and realized that Linda had already prepared for her questions. She decided to turn to her husband's old friend, Mr. Clark, who was a lawyer. "Clark, I'm afraid my daughter sold my house behind my back. Can you help me find out?" "Anne, this is serious. If you signed any documents, we need to check what they were. We may still have time to do something," he said, pulling out a notebook. Clark promised to start an investigation and get back to her as soon as possible. In her room, Anne sat for a long time looking at Linda's photo. She couldn't understand how her only daughter could do this to her. "Maybe I made a mistake somewhere," she asked herself, but then she realized that she couldn't let her doubts break her. She decided that she would find out the truth, even if it was painful. Anne sat at a small table in a room in the nursing home, holding a letter from Clark. It contained information he had received after checking the documents about the sale of her house. The lines of text cut her eyes. "Sold to pay off a debt." What debt? What kind of debt could be more important than my home? She thought, feeling anger and sadness mix in her chest, and decided it was time to find out for herself. She asked the nurse to help her arrange a meeting with Linda. "Mom, I didn't think you wanted to talk to me," Linda said when she arrived at the facility. Her voice was full of anxiety. "Linda, I found the documents about the sale of the house. And I want to know why you did it behind my back," Anne said, holding her gaze. Linda sighed and then said, "Mom, it was the only thing I could do. Brian and I were in big trouble." Linda began to tell me how her husband Brian had lost his job to downsizing, and the business she was trying to start had failed. "We were in debt, Mom. We had no money to pay the mortgage. I knew you always said that the house was our asset, but I didn't see any other way out," Linda said tearfully. "You could have come to me. We could have found another solution together," Anne replied, feeling her anger mix with compassion. "I was afraid you wouldn't understand. And then things got worse," Linda added. Anne was shocked to learn that Linda had not only sold the house, but had also used the money to pay off Brian's huge debt. Brian made a deal that turned out to be a failure. He borrowed money from a private lender and we started receiving threats. I couldn't let this affect the children. Linda admitted. You decided to ruin my life to save yours, asked Anne, disbelieving her own ears. Linda continued to make excuses. I thought it was temporary. I had a plan to get everything back. But then I ran out of money and realized I couldn't fix it. Why didn't you trust me? Didn't our family deserve honesty? Ella, asked Anne, feeling her heart clench. I was afraid you would hate me, and now I see that it did. Linda replied, burying her face in her hands. Anne returned to her room after the conversation, feeling devastated. She realized that Linda had acted out of fear, but that did not justify her actions. Will I ever be able to forgive her? Anne thought as she looked at the photo of her house, which was now lost forever. She realized that she was facing a difficult choice: accept Linda along with her mistakes or cut ties with her forever. Anne could not wait any longer. Her heart was filled with anger and pain. She invited Linda to come over the next day for a serious talk. It was a moment Anne both dreaded and longed for. When Linda arrived, the atmosphere in the room became tense. Mom, what do you want to tell me? Asked Linda, visibly nervous. I want you to explain to me how you could betray me like that, replied Anne sharply. Linda sighed and began, Mom, I know I made a mistake, but I was acting to protect my family. Your family. Emma, what about me? Am I not a part of your family anymore? Anne's voice trembled with indignation. You've always been important to me, but Brian and I were in such circumstances that I just didn't know what to do, Linda justified. Anne held up her hand to stop the flow of excuses. Linda, you didn't just sell my house. You robbed me of the only place I could call home. And now I have to live here, among strangers, and feel like a stranger even to you. Anna, I thought you would understand, Linda said, looking down. But there's more, isn't there? Something you haven't told me, Anne said, looking directly into her daughter's eyes. Linda began to cry. Yes, Mom. Not only did we use the money from the sale of the house, but we took out a loan in your name. Anne froze, her eyes widening in shock. A loan in my name. Linda, are you kidding me? That's a crime. I knew you would be angry, but I thought I could pay it off on time. But the situation got out of hand. Linda could barely speak through her tears. Linda, do you realize what you've done? You have destroyed not only my life, but the trust that we had between us. How could you? Anne could barely keep from screaming. Mom, I was desperate. I didn't know how to save us. And now I see that things have gotten even worse, Linda replied, holding her head in her hands. Anne took a deep breath and said, Linda, you have put me in a bind. But this is not just your burden anymore. This is our problem, and I have to decide how to proceed. After the conversation, Anne was left alone with her thoughts. She realized that her daughter had made a terrible mistake, but she also saw that Linda was acting out of fear and desperation. Can I forgive her? Is it worth it? And will I be able to find the strength to start over? Thought Anne, looking out the window. Anne couldn't take it anymore. After a night of no sleep, full of reflection and pain, she realized it was time to act. She invited Linda to a family dinner, knowing that the presence of other relatives would help bring everything to the surface. When everyone gathered around the table, the atmosphere was tense. Anne, sitting in the center of attention, remained silent until the moment came. I want to talk about something important, she began, looking at everyone present. Linda, I found out about the sale of my house. Anne continued, addressing her daughter. The room became as quiet as a tomb. Linda turned pale, her eyes widening in surprise. Mom, I can explain. Linda began, but Anne interrupted her. Explain? How do you explain that you sold my house without my permission? How could you betray me, your mother, like that? Anne's voice was steady, but she could feel the anger in it. Linda's brother, Michael, could not stand it and said, Linda, is it true? You really did this to your mom? Linda sighed and tears began to roll down her face. I didn't want to do it, but Brian and I were having money problems. We lost almost everything, and I thought it was a temporary solution. Temporary. You robbed your mom of her home, and now she's living in a nursing home while you get on with your life. Michael was outraged. Other relatives also began to ask questions, and Linda felt the ground slipping from under her feet. Anne stood up from the table. table, her voice calm but firm. "Linda, I want to hear the whole truth. I know you not only sold my house, but you took out a loan in my name. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you ask for help?" Linda lowered her head. "Mom, I was afraid you would say no. We were so desperate, and I thought I could fix everything before you knew. And now what? You've destroyed not only my life, but our trust. And how could you betray me like that?" asked Anne, looking directly into her daughter's eyes. Brian, Linda's husband, interjected. "We had no choice. We did it for our children. You would have done the same if you were in our shoes." "Ma?" Michael stood up. "Don't you dare justify this! You used my mom, her life, and her money. That's not acceptable." The situation became even more tense as other relatives began to argue. Some supported Anne, while others tried to understand Linda. Anne raised her hand to silence everyone. "This is my business, and I will decide what to do next. Linda, I gave you everything I could, but now I have to defend myself. I will consult a lawyer and do everything I can to get my life back." Linda started to cry. "Mom, please give me a chance to make things right. It's up to you, Elena, but know that it will be very difficult to regain your trust," Anne replied as she left the room. Anne realized that this moment was a turning point in her life. She realized that she had to be strong to fight for her future. Anne sat in her room in the nursing home, holding an old photo album. In each picture, Linda was a smiling little girl who had once loved her mother so much. But now, after everything that had happened, Anne couldn't deciding should she forgive her daughter and try to preserve family relationships, or should she continue to fight to get her property back. Anne turned the pages of the album, remembering how she had raised Linda herself. She gave everything: her love, her support, her money. She remembered moments when Linda, as a little girl, would hug her and say, "Mom, I will always love you." What happened to that Linda? Thought Anne, wiping away her tears. These memories made her heart ache even more. As a mother, she felt deep pain because of the betrayal. But could she let those feelings completely destroy their bond? On the one hand, Anne knew that fighting to get her house back was only fair. Her daughter had used her trust and robbed her of her home. She felt that Linda should be held accountable for her actions. "I deserve to be respected. This is my life and no one has the right to do this to me," she told herself. On the other hand, Anne's heart was filled with love for her daughter. She realized that Linda also had her reasons, even if they were selfish. Forgiveness could give her a chance to restore family relationships. If I don't forgive her, will I be able to live with this pain?" she thought. That day, her lawyer came to see her to discuss the next steps. He offered to start the official process of returning the property. "Mrs. Anne, we can prove your case. You have every chance of winning the case," he said. But Anne suddenly felt frightened by this prospect. A trial could completely destroy her relationship with Linda. "If I go down this road, will I ever be able to see my grandchildren?" she asked the lawyer. "It's a tough choice, Mrs. Anne, but it is up to you," the lawyer replied. And Anne called her son Michael, seeking support. "Mom, I know you love Linda, but she had no right to do this to you. You deserve justice," Michael said. "But she's my daughter, Michael. If I sue her, we'll never be able to rebuild our relationship," Anne replied. "Mom, the choice is yours, but remember that your happiness is important too," Michael said. That night, Anne couldn't sleep for a long time. She envisioned two possible futures: one where she continues to fight and gets her house back, but loses her daughter, and the other where she forgives Linda, but lives with the pain of losing her trust. Can I find a way to connect these two roads?" she thought as she looked out the window. The next morning, Anne left the room with a clear decision. She decided to give Linda another chance, but with the condition that she must compensate her and take responsibility for her actions. "I can't live with hatred in my heart. But I also can't allow myself to be treated like this," she told Michael as she prepared to meet with Linda. Anne stood at the window of her room, holding the letter she had written to Linda. It contained not only words, but a piece of her heart. She made a choice that might surprise many people. "I can no longer remain a hostage to this pain. It's time to move forward," Anne thought as she opened the envelope to reread the letter. A letter contained two main messages: an apology for the mistakes she had made in their relationship, and a demand that Linda return some of the money. I'm ready to forgive, but only if you show that you really understand your mistakes, Anne wrote. She knew that Linda had the ability to make things right, but it required a willingness to take responsibility. Instead of staying in the nursing home, and decided to use the rest of her savings to start a new life. She planned to move to a small town where she could start from scratch. Have always dreamed of a place where I could grow flowers and live in peace. Maybe this is a sign that it's time to realize this dream, she told herself, before she left and met with Michael to thank him for his support. Mom, I'm always here for you. If you ever need anything, just call me, he said as he hugged her. You've been my rock, Michael, but now I want to try to be strong on my own, she replied, wiping away her tears. Anne decided to send the letter to Linda, but she didn't know how she would react. She realized it was a risk, but she also saw it as a chance to restore the relationship. Will she realize that this is her last chance? Anne thought as she threw the letter into the mailbox. When she moved to a small house on the outskirts of town, she was relieved. It was a modest place, but it was hers, and she could call it home. There is no luxurious furniture here, but there is peace and freedom, she told herself as she looked around the rooms. Anne began to settle into her new life, gardening and getting to know her neighbors. But questions remained. Would Linda answer the letter? Will they ever get back to normal? Anne picked up Linda's photo again and said, maybe this is not the end of our story. The ending leaves the audience in suspense. Did Anne do the right thing by choosing a new life instead of fighting for the old one? Will Linda return to her mother with an apology? What would you do in Anne's place? Ask the text at the end. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new exciting stories.